This episode is sponsored by Able Now, tax advantage savings accounts for eligible individuals with disabilities. If you're a parent, you know how important it is to plan for your child's future. But if your child has a disability, saving money can feel complicated, especially when you're trying to protect their eligibility for certain benefits like Medicaid. That's where Able Now comes in. Able Now accounts offer a tax-advantaged way to save for your child's future needs without jeopardizing eligibility for those critical disability services and supports. Funds in your account can be used for a wide range of expenses, everything from education to healthcare, housing, transportation, and even basic living expenses. Able Now accounts are available to qualified individuals in all 50 states. Are you eligible? Visit ablenow.com to learn how you can start saving today and join thousands of families using Able Now to secure a brighter future for their loved ones.
It's the smallest moments that end up mattering the most, and that all of us have this powerful tool on the tips of our tongue, that language isn't just a tool for self-expression, it's a tool that transforms what's happening on the inside. So if we're all collectively sort of wringing our hands and worried about kids' mental health and wanting to do what we can to help these beloved, wondrous people in our life, it's so comforting to know that the words we share with them can matter so much. And so my why is to offer those who care for children a guide that helps them remember, oh yeah, there's a lot that's out of my control, but I can control what I say. And I can give kids these words and phrases that they can tuck away and rely upon later, maybe even for decades to come.
I'm Debbie Reber, and welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. Today, we're talking about one of the most accessible and impactful tools we've got to help our kids thrive. But this tool is so simple and obvious that we may not even realize its immense power. I'm talking about words, as in the words we use when talking with our children. The language we use with our kids can make a profound difference in the way our kids relate to themselves and how their brains process situations. We're going to explore this concept with Lily Howard Scott, an educator, speaker, and author of the new book, The Words That Shape Us: The Science-Based Power of Teacher Language. Lily has spent nearly a decade teaching elementary school and now helps educators create classrooms where children feel known, valued, and empowered. She is passionate about the ways language can influence how kids see themselves, process emotions, and build resilience. And she wrote this book to help teachers, parents, and really any other adult who works with children positively transform how students think, feel, and achieve through effectively tapping into this tool that everybody has access to. During our conversation, Lily shares how small shifts in the way we speak to children, both at home and in the classroom, can make a huge difference in their confidence, emotional intelligence, and ability to navigate challenges. We talked about practical strategies like using metaphors to help kids manage emotions and reframing how we talk about mistakes and setbacks. Lily also explains the role that words play in fostering a sense of belonging and emotional safety in kids, which is essential for learning and growth, especially for neurodivergent kids who may struggle with self-perception. Again, these are small shifts that can make a huge difference. So I hope you can take these suggestions and apply them right after you finish listening to this episode. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Lily Howard Scott. Hey there, Lily. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Me too. I'm looking forward to this conversation. People have been sharing their work with me, and I'm like, well, it's not necessarily my typical podcast guest, but then I learned more about the work and I'm like, this is so important for my community to know about. And so this is one of those conversations where there's so much synergy and alignment in the work that we're doing. And so now with that set up, let's take a step back. And if you want to just take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to be doing the work that you're doing, kind of your why in this space.
Thanks for asking. Well, now I support teachers and school leaders with literacy instruction and social and emotional learning, but I will always identify as a third grade teacher at heart. I taught elementary school for nearly 10 years and just found kids to be such wonderful company. Second graders, third graders, they're so unself-conscious and funny and wise and wonderful. And as I taught over the years, I realized that the words and phrases that the kiddos had access to seemed to play a really big role in their ability to self-regulate, in their ability to operate with self-compassion or not, even to find joy in ordinary moments. And that led me to sort of learn as much as I could about language and led to this book. But I'm so happy to be here with you because as an inclusion teacher, as a teacher who supported neurodivergent students, so much of what I know to be true about teaching and learning, that you teach the kid, not the curriculum, and that you always make space for kids' strength and interest, I learned from being an inclusive teacher. And I think the best part of the book are the poems by my neuroatypical students. And I'm so glad that those poems have space to breathe now.
Yes. And I will say too, what you're saying echoes what we've heard other guests talk about on the show. And what we believe to be true is that when you use strategies or teachers consider their neurodivergent learners in the way that they're teaching, all students benefit, because we know that the typical, and I'm using air quotes here, the typical way of teaching, there may be some students who can be quote unquote successful with that model, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily thriving in the way that we want them to.
That's such a good point. Something I've been thinking a lot about is that even the kids who look like they're thriving, even those neurotypical kids who are meeting all the achievement metrics in really glittering ways, that actually I'd argue there's this own quiet toxicity to their success in school, right? That lesson of, oh, when you comply and achieve in this very specific way, and then the golden gates open and you move forward in your school career, that can really look like success and is success in school. But when they graduate, they haven't had much practice thinking about their own interests or motivations, and definitely can feel like their self-worth is tethered to this glittering achievement. And so sometimes I joke with my colleagues, like, who does this work for? It doesn't actually really work sometimes for the kids who it looks like it's working for. It certainly doesn't work for those who really struggle. I mean, I think they say B and C students are the ones who are the most successful in the end anyway. So
I'm feeling very seen right now as a C student.
Oh, you are?
For sure.
Yeah. I'm a solid B student too. So maybe I'm just saying this to validate myself. But yeah, I think that a one size fits all approach to learning fails all sorts of kids in obvious ways and in less obvious ways.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, what I'd like to do before we really get into this is talk about the big picture of your book. So listeners, the name of the book is The Words That Shape Us, The Science-Based Power of Teacher Language. Can you tell us about the book and why you wrote it?
Yeah, so the book is about how subtle changes in language, and I appreciate you sharing, yes, teacher language, but really I'd argue caregiver language, parent language, that subtle changes in language can initiate a really tectonic shift in the way that kids perceive themselves and their abilities, in the way they navigate challenges. And this is because, of course, the way that grown-ups talk to young kids becomes the way that they talk to themselves. And there is some really groundbreaking recent research about what language can do in this regard. I think all caregivers and teachers know that words matter, but Lisa Feldman Barrett wrote this wonderful book, How Emotions Are Made. And in it, she shares that emotions don't so much happen to us as we make them. They're just predictions that we make in the micro moment, and the words and phrases kids have access to can seed how their brains predict. And I think this truth carries really profound implications and hopeful implications for the ways that we all speak to kids, particularly as anxiety soars and perfectionist tendency soars, because we can help kids sort of make those shifts in prediction in really beautiful ways. And I'd be happy to share some examples about how that works.
Yeah, I do want to hear examples of that and talk a little bit more about the why for this book and what you really wanted to get it out into the world to do.
Yeah, well, I think that anybody who becomes a teacher or anybody who cares for kids hopes that the love and the responsiveness that they're pouring into that relationship will somehow help the kid grow in ways that are healthy and beautiful. My why is rooted in the idea that it's the smallest moments that end up mattering the most, and that all of us have this powerful tool on the tips of our tongue, that language isn't just a tool for self-expression, it's a tool that transforms what's happening on the inside. So if we're all collectively sort of wringing our hands and worried about kids' mental health and wanting to do what we can to help these beloved, wondrous people in our life, it's so comforting to know that the words we share with them can matter so much. And so my why is to offer those who care for children a guide that helps them remember, oh yeah, there's a lot that's out of my control, but I can control what I say. And I can give kids these words and phrases that they can tuck away and rely upon later, maybe even for decades to come. I love what Dr. Bruce Perry says about this, that the most powerful and enduring human interactions are often very brief. I find that to be so hopeful that like growth for kids comes through the steady accumulation of moments that are like 1 to 2 minutes long, that are connected moments, and the language we use in those connected moments can sort of reverberate within the kids' inner lives in beautiful ways. So that's my why.
That's great. I love it. Your book is very practical, and in sharing these phrases and these terms that can be, again, just subtle shifts, which I love a subtle shift to have a big impact. Like, it's so true.
What else can we do?
Yeah. Give us some examples about the kinds of things that you wanted to share with readers.
One example I often share that sort of illustrates this shift in prediction is if you could imagine a kiddo who, rooted in previous experiences with caregivers, with teachers, has a brain that is wired to predict, nope, when that kid makes mistakes. You know, that kid wants to look away from the mistake, does not want to sit with it, does not want to investigate it. Maybe that kid had a shaming experience in the past. That's too bad, because we know that kiddos can only learn from mistakes if they have the capacity to sit with them. And that can lead to the most powerful cognitive growth of all. But if he has a second grade teacher or a third grade teacher who at the beginning of the year says, okay, every time you make a mistake, I'm going to say, what a brilliant mistake. What learning can it lead us to? And I'm going to say that because when we really investigate our mistakes, new brilliant thinking is available to us. And maybe she shares that example about Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin by investigating a moldy petri dish he forgot to cap. Because the way we talk to kids becomes the way they talk to themselves, well, first, the kid will probably look at her blankly. Will feel like the language is just ricocheting off of him. But hopefully he tucks it away. And when he begins to rely on that language in that moment of noticing a mistake, it's a brilliant mistake. What learning does it have for me? Lisa Feldman Barrett calls that an energized determination. And the more that the child relies on that language, the more his brain begins to predict differently. And he can meet that moment with a more regulated nervous system and with curiosity, as opposed to with sweaty palms or with a churning stomach. And he can actually bear to sit with the mistake. So that's a small example of a phrase that the kid can tuck away and rely upon. And there's another one in the book about Ish-fulness, which is all about sort of talking back to perfectionist tendencies. I have another one in there about wrapping words around your inner voice, like your truest, kindest, most to you part of you, which, as one third grader told me, I didn't know I had that wise part of me. Like, if you can name it, it exists. And an important thing I want to mention is these are all suggestions. Hopefully kiddos and teachers and parents adapt the language and make it their own. It's not a script at all.
I love that example you shared. I had that written down here. What a brilliant mistake. What learning can you find in it? Especially because of the fact that, of course, no two neurodivergent kids are the same, but many of them are perfectionistic. Many of them do really place their identity and value based on their intellect, or many of them have experiences of being shamed for making mistakes or doing it quote unquote wrong. There's a lot of air quotes in this episode. I do love that example. What a brilliant mistake. Just kind of imagining the impact when that language is introduced at such a young age, and it does become part of that internal dialogue instead of the I'm broken, I'm a screw up, which can so often be the root for so many of our kids.
Totally. And I also think it gives the kiddo some agency, right? I think that we forget how often kids they're just told what to do all day, right? By teachers, where to stand, where to sit, what page to open their book to. By parents, I do it. Like, I tell my young kids, you have to take a bath, you have to wear a coat. I think it makes sense that when a thought enters their brain, like, I'm the stupidest, or, everyone's going to laugh at me, or, I'll never be able to get this right. It sort of feels like it's just one more thing happening to them in the ocean of things happening to them all day long. And the notion that actually we have some agency inside of us, like as David Foster Wallace says, learning how to think means learning how to choose what to pay attention to in your own head. When that visitor pops by, having that language like, nope, if I investigate it, there's brilliance there. A way to kind of talk back to that thought, I think, just gives kids a little agency they didn't realize that they had in the first place.
Yeah. That's great. Let's take a quick break, and then I would love if we can talk through the different parts that you broke down in your book. once I find a recipe I love, I make it on repeat until I either get tired of it or get distracted by something new. I also crave variety, but all the executive functioning required to plan, shop, and prep just slows me down. That's why I love Green Chef. It takes the guesswork out of mealtime by delivering pre-measured, prepped ingredients straight to my door. With fresh produce, lean proteins, and whole grains, it makes healthy eating simple and stress-free. If you're looking to reset your eating habits in a sustainable way, you might want to check out Green Chef's Reset Collection, which is available for a limited time. These are dietitian-approved meals that offer fiber support, are lower in saturated fat, and come in under 700 calories per serving. With pre-portioned ingredients and simple prep, it is a stress-free way to enjoy meals that support your health and fit your lifestyle. Also, Green Chef is owned by HelloFresh, so you get even more meal plan options with the convenience of both brands. So I love switching back and forth between the two, and now my listeners can enjoy a discount on both brands with me. Thrive all year with clean, easy meals from Green Chef. Go to greenchef.com/tiltfree and use code TILTFREE to get started with free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box. That's free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box when you go to greenchef.com/tiltfree and use code TILTFREE. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. One of the ways I can tell I'm growing and evolving as a parent and a human is that when I have difficult interactions or stressful periods in my life, I know to reach for a tool or strategy that can help me regulate my nervous system and get myself centered and calm so I'm better able to weather that particular storm. One of my most favorite go-to resources for such moments, and also just to proactively tend to my mental and emotional well-being, is the Calm app. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. Mental health and healthiness isn't one size fits all, which is why Calm offers a variety of tools to help navigate life's ups and downs. From meditations designed to ease anxiety, improve focus, and build healthy habits, to sleep stories, soothing music, and guided exercises for relaxation, there's something for whatever you need in the moment. Calm also features expert-led talks on topics like grief, self-esteem, and relationships, making it easy to access support anytime, anywhere. Just a few minutes a day can make a big difference, and Calm puts those tools right in your pocket. Stress less, sleep more, and live better with Calm. For listeners of our show, Calm is offering an exclusive offer of 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/tilt. Go to calm.com/tilt for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/tilt. I don't like going clothing shopping, especially when I'm looking for something specific, like for an event. I get overwhelmed with the whole process and I can spend hours looking for the right thing, but I usually come home empty-handed. So I'm really loving Quince, my new go-to for luxury essentials at affordable prices. It's one-stop shopping online for really well-designed and well-made clothes, like their 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50, washable silk tops and dresses, and organic cotton sweaters. I recently got this really cool, kind of fancy black silk top that I would never have gravitated toward in a store due to that shopping overwhelm, not to mention I can only imagine what the price tag would have been in a traditional store. But Quince's prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands because they partner directly with top factories. So they're cutting out the middleman and they're passing those savings on to you. Plus, Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. Oh, and Quince doesn't just have clothes. You can also find other high-quality luxe products like Italian leather handbags and European linen sheets. Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/tilt for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/tilt to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/tilt. In the book, you break it down into 4 parts, and I'd love to spend a little time with each of them. So the first one is establish and maintain a connected classroom. So of course, I love connected classroom, feels relationship-based. How do you define a connected classroom?
Thanks for asking. I think I would define it as a classroom in which all kids feel uniquely known, heard, and valued. And it's funny, all of the strategies really there for a connected classroom could also be true for a connected home. And what I'm about to say is not true for a home, is only specific to a school. But what I find so strange is the way that those far away from the classroom policymakers are so focused on achievement without understanding that, of course, how kids feel is tethered to how they do. And when kids feel connected to each other and to their teacher in the classroom, they're able to take all sorts of risks and certainly operate with more resilience than in disconnected classrooms. So it really goes hand in hand with academic learning too.
I love that you said helping all kids feel known, like to feel known. What a powerful concept, right? To just be seen in that way. So give us an example of how a teacher can really help to kind of maintain this sense of connection in a classroom. Is there like a phrase or a strategy or tool that you can share?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. I think, first of all, to your point, it's amazing how often we don't feel known at school and how strange that is, right? When one doesn't feel known, it's just infinitely harder to take those risks again that lead to meaningful learning. So thank you for that. I think that something that can feel radical to kids is a teacher saying something like this: I have taught in this room before, and kids have sat on this rug before, but that kid has never been you. And I am so excited to teach you, not the curriculum. Everything you bring to this classroom community matters. Your hopes, your interests, your quirks, your worries, all of that is mixing together in wonderful ways, and it's going to inform how the year unfolds, the curriculum we jump into. Everything you bring to this community matters. Tell me, what is one thing you'd like me to know about you? Even something as simple as that, just repeating the language. Everything you bring to this community matters. Tell me one thing that you'd like me to know about you. Kids have said things to me like, I want you to know that when we go out and my little brother is next to me, sometimes I feel like I'm invisible because he's the cutest baby. Or I want you to know that I'm not afraid of snakes, even though they're the number 2 fear in the world. Or a kid once said, I want you to know that I haven't had a mirror book in a class before. A mirror book meaning a book that reflects something important about their identity that they didn't feel was known. And so the kids can offer those contributions in big ways or in little ways, like in light ways or serious ways. But I think so often kids just feel like a cog in a classroom machine, and being explicitly told, you're not a cog in this classroom machine. In fact, what you bring is what will make this year wondrous, can feel like a big surprise to kids. I like to create list poems, like things we bring to our classroom community. There's one, I forget which page it's on, but they're just so fun. Like one of them is, I worry about homework. Another one was like, being a triplet can be hard. Another one was, I have synesthesia. And actually, all of those things we wove into our class work for the year somehow. So that's just a little example of something small a teacher can say that can make a big difference.
I really wish I could go back in an alternate timeline and have you as my teacher, like in 3rd grade. It sounds supportive, and what a special thing for a student to feel seen in that way. And I want to just say to one of the examples you just shared, that everything you bring to this classroom matters. You say that's also language we can then use at home. Like everything that you're sharing, we can use in our families. Families can say everything that you bring to this family matters. And we can help our kids feel known and seen in that same way.
Yeah, there's a poem in the book by a family, actually, like something I bring to this family is. And I think if you as a parent emphasize that it's the little idiosyncratic things about you too that I value so much, that you send the message to your kid, like just you being precisely you is what I value, not the shiny achievement-oriented stuff, can help that kid feel buoyed, with such a sense of belonging and enoughness. And also something I'd like you to know about me, language, it inevitably sometimes leads to the kid surprising the parent, right? In a way that can sometimes be hard or sometimes be wonderful. But I think it can help that parent honor the space between them and their kid, that sentence stem, and see their kids sort of with fresh eyes in a way that ultimately can lead to closeness and understanding.
Yeah, and that's a concept you talk about, the separateness of ourselves from our children, which is not something that I think a lot of people are talking about in the way that you do. And it's so important that our kids feel that they are separate from us while being connected to us. Can you talk a little bit about that concept?
Yes. Well, first, I'd love to ask you, only because it's a favorite book of mine, and though I've only met you briefly, I have a feeling it might resonate. Have you read The Anti-Romantic Child by Priscilla Gilman?
I have not read it, but I know of it.
Okay. Yeah. It's a wonderful book about Priscilla's experience being a parent to her son who has hyperlexia. And this idea of honoring the separateness between us and our kids, I really started thinking about this when I read a Rilke quote that she had included in her beautiful book. And the quote is something like, once we acknowledge or embrace that even between the closest of people, infinite distances continue to exist, a loving living side by side can happen when we can see each other whole against the sky. And just this idea of remembering that it's production, not reproduction, and that the moments with our kids when we think, whoa, I wouldn't do it that way, or that's completely alien to me, that when you can try to look at that distance in a loving way and see each other whole against the sky, as opposed to projecting endlessly or feeling panic because the kid doesn't like sports and you love sports or whatever it was, you're neurotypical, the kid isn't. That embracing that separateness, I have found to be so helpful for me as a parent. I also repeat that Khalil Gibran line, your children are not your children. They come through you, but not from you. That helps me embrace the separateness. And for teachers too, sometimes it's like, oh, who has the class where the kids are achieving in this way with their reading levels? And just remembering like, you are separate from your students' achievement. It's not a reflection of you. That like in any relationship, leaning into that space between you is healthy, I think, and hard to do.
Hard to do. I'm glad you came up with the Khalil Gibran quote. There's a song that was made out of it, Sweet Honey and the Bee. And I'm like singing that song. And then you brought it up. So thank you for that. Listeners, I'm going to have links to these references too, because it would be worth going and reading the poem and reading the lyrics, because I think this is a profound concept. So let's take a quick break and then we'll go into some of the other parts in your book. My husband, Darren, and I have a lot going on right now, and we are both wired in such a way that routine is a serious antidote to feeling discombobulated or out of sorts. And that's one of the big reasons why we're such fans of Factor. Chef-crafted, fresh, fully prepared meals delivered straight to our door. Factor ticks all the boxes for us. That they are delivered on the same day each week and are predictably healthy feels grounding. That they're just the right portion size and ready in 2 minutes takes the guesswork out of figuring out what's for dinner, or in Darren's case, lunch, as Factor has become his go-to for weekday meals. This week's favorite meal, grilled chicken with mushrooms and rice. If eating well feels like one more thing on your plate, Factor makes it easy. There are 40 meal options each week across 8 dietary preferences, including keto, protein plus, and calorie smart. Plus, Factor's smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks can keep you fueled all day long. If you want to jumpstart your health goals, Factor will help you stay on track with their quality ingredients and unbeatable convenience, no matter how busy your life gets. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. After watching this season of the HBO's original series, The White Lotus, this is the tropical getaway I needed. One more pina colada, please.
Hey, you're not on mute.
Oh, I thought I was in paradise. Turns out it was my Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate Pina Colada and Thai-iced coffee-flavored creamers. Inspired by the newest season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus. For the love of coffee. Try now.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed, for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free second look review. Second look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
The second part of the book is cultivate students' self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-regulation. So what would you like to share with us about that part in the book?
I suppose that complete self-understanding is never possible, but the right words can help kids unlock a lot of what's going on within them in ways that are tremendously helpful. And if you give those kiddos tools when they're 7, 8, or 9, the tools will stick with them throughout their life. I feel like parents and elementary school teachers have this secret power, which is that young kids are just less crippled by self-consciousness than older kids and sort of are more able to receive language that helps them navigate their inner lives than a middle schooler or a high schooler. So you give it to them young and then they tuck it away and they rely on it. One of my favorite language nuggets from this section, or perhaps not favorite, but most useful, is this idea of just referring to feelings as visitors, which is inspired by Rumi's wonderful poem, The Guest House. Like, this being human is a guest house, every day a new arrival, an unexpected visitor. I think so often kids feel like they are their feeling, that they feel this tornado inside or this volcano and there's nothing to be done about it. And language that helps kids remember feelings come, feelings go. Your core self is always wonderful and wise and good. As you experience different feeling visitors, can help kids, again, just see their feelings with more distance and more self-compassion. So that's one little nugget from that section.
Yeah, I mean, that is still something I'm personally working on, like as an adult woman here, but I do think that is so powerful. And some of the language you shared in there is hello, feeling visitor. You mentioned that earlier in the conversation, but that separation, it's kind of, I'm thinking of Tina Payne Bryson and Dan Siegel's work, Name It to Tame It. Like, I see you. It doesn't mean that it's a good or a bad thing. It just is what it is. And one of the other things you say is, what can your wisest self say back to the other thoughts and feelings in your head, encouraging this internal agency. And I think that is so important, especially for kids who might feel things more intensely, who again might be more rigid thinkers or incredibly intelligent. And so it can be disconcerting to feel like there's this part of me that I can't control, or what does this piece of me mean about who I am? And realizing we can have a relationship with this part of us. It's not a good or a bad part. It just is a part.
Yes, that's so beautifully said. I couldn't have said it better. I don't think kiddos or even some adults, I still struggle with this, realize that we're made out of parts, which is, of course, informed by Schwartz's work, Internal Family System. And just knowing, to your point, name it to tame it, oh, there's that part, right? But it's not who I am. The idea of wrapping words around a wisest self, which I like to say to kids, is just the truest, kindest, most you part of you, is, I think, the most powerful emotional management tool I've ever encountered, because if you can wrap words around it, then it exists. This really hit home for me. My student Harper was 8 at the time, an exceptionally high achieving kid, a kid who one might presume, oh, school is totally easy for you. You're not having those cacophonous conversations in your head. And she said to me, after I introduced the idea of a wisest self, she said, can I call it my president decider? Because president decider gets to choose what to pay attention to inside of me. And she wrote these 2 poems. One of them was from the voice of pressure that she hears. And I have it on page 73. It's this remarkable poem. She describes pressure as red-faced, open mouth, knocking at the door of her mind. Pressure is screaming, raise your hand higher, show that you care. The last 2 words are, I'm trying. And it was this reminder to me that, like, first of all, high achievement is often just regulated anxiety, but that all kids benefit from learning to talk to themselves with love. And her President Decider writes this poem back to pressure. And President Decider, it's a poem for 2 voices. Pressure says, do your challenge work. And President Decider says, you don't always have to do your challenge work. It's good for you to play too. There's so many moments as a teacher, you're kind of just chugging through the day and you're picking up the goldfish on the floor and you're tired. And then there are these like transcendent moments that just stick with you. And for me, it was listening to Harper read that poem for 2 voices between President Decider and Pressure that reminded me how important it is to give kids language to navigate their inner lives. And when I'm having a hard day, I'm like, what would my President Decider say? And to your point, sometimes I listen to President Decider, sometimes I don't, but I like to know that it's there. And I should say that was an ICT classroom. Harper didn't have an IEP, but many kids in the class did. And as they looked at her and listened to her read this poem about what her President Decider says to herself and about what Pressure says to her, they had that Me Too moment of like, oh, it's not just me. School is even really hard for her sometimes. And then I think there's that beautiful moment of realizing that what you assume alienates you often connects you. And in her own way, Harper was neuroatypical because she had synesthesia, this perceptual phenomenon that allowed her to associate colors with letters. But that was just a beautiful year of teaching in Brooklyn, of all the kids looking at each other in new ways. And I think those new ways were open to them through the words they had access to, that they adapted and made their own.
Such a great story. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. The third part is inspire students to strive for independence and take academic risks. There's a quote that I pulled out that really stuck with me. And also, listeners, this is where the concept of what a brilliant mistake comes into play. But you wrote, when we shame kids for not trying hard enough when they're trying with all their might, we teach them this toxic lesson: trying doesn't work. And I was like, truth bomb right there. So tell me a little bit more about this way that we can inspire students to keep trying, right? And to not internalize that there's something wrong with those mistakes.
It's so funny, isn't it? Kids have trouble and we say, keep going, you've got it, keep trying. The kid is like, I am trying. I'm trying with all my might. And for me, it was Dr. Ross Greene's work around how kids do well if they can versus kids do well if they want to that helped me realize, no, everybody's trying. If a kid isn't doing well, it's because something is hard for them. Maybe they need extra help with something, or they have a lagging skill, an unmet need. And so the language in this section is around words to rely on that can help you operate with resilience and independence, that can move you away from thinking, oh, if I only tried harder, this would be easier. Language like think Ish-fully, which is inspired by Peter H. Reynolds' beautiful book, Ish. It's about a boy who tries to draw a flower, doesn't look like what he had in mind, tries to draw a turtle, doesn't look like the turtle he was thinking of, crumples up his work, and then his sister uncrumples it and puts it around his room like a gallery and says, it's flower-ish, it's turtle-ish. And this idea of being Ish-ful, it's not about doing something halfway. It's just realizing that whatever you think will happen, and what happens, it's very rare that what you bring forth aligns with your initial plan. In fact, there's so much beauty and delight in bringing forth something that's a little different from what you imagined. And thinking Ish-fully lets kids embrace that and sort of be more gentle on themselves when the word they were writing doesn't really look the way it looks in books, or when the picture they're creating looks a little different than what they'd imagined. It's funny, sometimes the most seemingly supportive language has its own underbelly, and language around try harder. That's definitely something I've been working on moving away from, because I don't know one kid. I've never met one kid who just really wasn't trying hard enough. I think we're all doing the best we can.
Yeah, there's always a reason why we're big fans of Ross Greene here, for sure. I wrote about this in Differently Wired, but when I first read that, his signature phrase, kids do well when they can, my child was in first grade, I believe. And I just wanted to walk around the school with a big sign, because there was this sense of this is a choice. And we know that it's not a choice if a child isn't succeeding. There's always that underlying reason why. So I really appreciated that. Part 4 is supporting students when they exhibit challenging behaviors. And you share a lot of good phrasing that doesn't instill shame and that really helps the child feel good as they continue to learn and grow. There's 2 words that I wanted to just highlight, just because. Can you talk about the power of those 2 words?
I think just because language helps kids who struggle, or really just all kids, any of us, lean into both and thinking that this is true and this is true. And I think sometimes when we don't have words to wrap around that complexity, kids can show their frustration at being misunderstood in just other ways. It's going to come out somehow, whether it's flipping over the table or yelling at you. So I remember just because language sort of helped kids clarify something they'd been longing to say, but maybe hadn't been able to before. And I remember particularly for neurodivergent kiddos, one child in particular who had an IEP said this: just because I get upset doesn't mean I'm mean. Another child with an IEP said, just because I'm quiet on the rug doesn't mean I don't have ideas in my head. And I remember he got a chorus of this symbol, which was our classroom symbol for me too, me too. And he looked around and thought, oh, again, it's not just me. Or my student Tirza, she didn't use just because language, which I think is wonderful. It's really important that if you introduce it and the kid says, oh yeah, I'll take the ethos of that, but do it in my own way, you just say, great. She wrote this essentially a just because poem, but differently. She said, when you see a playground, I see a magical forest. I may not be good at word study, but when I see an ocean, I see a whole world worth exploring. And what she was doing was essentially sharing, yes, some things are hard for me because I have dyslexia. And I have all these strengths that don't exist in spite of my dyslexia. but are directly tethered to my dyslexia. And these two things coexist at once. She said something about struggling to learn math facts, but being an exceptional creative thinker. Her poem's in the book too, but watching my students really shape words around all their strengths that were tethered to their neurodivergence using just because language was a really beautiful thing. And one of those poems, it's so interesting. A kid who had just moved to my classroom, I can't remember if he'd immigrated recently from Turkey or had been living in the United States for a couple years, but I wasn't aware that he was neurodivergent. And he listened to one student's poem and then wrote him a little feedback slip that just said, me too, because of that just because poem. And again, back to the idea of connectedness. When you see yourself in a peer, it's just so validating. And yeah, that was another one of those classroom moments that I kind of tuck away and return to.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you took that experience and decided I need to share this with more people so that other educators and families can understand the power of the words that shape us, naming your book, and really use this language in the child's formative years. It's never really too early, I think, to start using this language. It's also, just for listeners who are raising now middle schoolers and high schoolers, it's not too late to start using this language either. But as a way to wrap us up, my listenership, right? It's predominantly parents. There's some educators, some therapists, people who are thought leaders in the neurodivergent space. But what would you like to leave listeners with in terms of something they could think about tonight as they interact with their child or their student?
Maybe this idea that we offer the language. And I think we need to let go of the idea that the kid will ever say to us, thank you so much for giving me a just because STEM. Now I really, when something is hard for me, I'm going to remember it's not because I'm not trying hard enough, that we just offer it. And the kid likely looks at us blankly or doesn't even look up for what they're doing, but to not be deterred by that. Another way of thinking of I am as I am seen, as so many have said, is I am as I hear you talk about me. And the words we just put out into the atmosphere around these extraordinary kiddos who we love so much, they do nestle within the kid's inner life. And in a month from now, or 2 months from now, or 10 years from now, that kiddo may remember, well, okay, just because this is hard for me doesn't mean that I'm not an excellent student or whatever it is. Or language like, all right, I'm hearing that, but what would my president decider say? Or what would my wisest self say? Just because I think it doesn't make it true. And I think we're so preoccupied with measurement these days. What did the kid learn? Or how can you show me the kid got it? And I think we really need to release that. There's something so toxic about being too preoccupied with measurement. You offer it and then you kind of let it go. And 15 years from now, a kid may make a mistake and then say, okay, what learning is in there for me? And the language that you offered, I really believe sort of crosses time and space to be a part of that moment with the kid.
I love that as a big takeaway from this conversation, because a lot of what we talk about here and what I'm always sharing is there are, first of all, no quick ways to change our child's worldview or have them be a different person from who they are or change their behavior. And so many of us are often looking for, how do I get my kid to do this? Or what is the way for this to happen? So I love this reminder of just not being attached to the outcome, but to recognize that it all matters, like everything that we say. And you talk about repairing too, right? So it's not to say that it's ever too late to do this work. So releasing this idea of what it's going to look like and knowing that at the end of the day, it's in there. And it also, while it's helping shape them and helping them hopefully grow up with a strong sense of self and having this emotional intelligence, it's also helping us be more connected and in relationship with them.
Yes. Connectedness is everything. When kids feel that connectedness, when they feel that strong well inside them, then everything is easier. And I think I learned that as an elementary school teacher, that a kid can't send you an email 10 years later and say, thanks for that. That in a way, your job feels mysterious, like you offer it and then they leave and then they're out in the world. Upon reflection, I think that is sort of similar to being a parent of a young kid. You offer it, you see what happens, you kind of let it go, and you let go of the illusion that they'll ever feel like a moment of proof. You just do what you can and try to do it lovingly. And again, also that these words are such a balm for you, that I rely on these words when I'm ruminating or when I am feeling just deeply anxious. I hope that the language in the book is something that any reader can tuck away and use themselves.
Yeah, 1,000%. Again, as I said earlier, I'm still working on all this stuff. So it's super helpful. I'm going to just recap. The book is called The Words That Shape Us, The Science-Based Power of Teacher Language. And where can listeners learn more about you and the book?
Well, you can find the book anywhere books are sold. You can learn a little bit about how I support schools and young children through my website, which is lilyhowardscott.com. And thank you so much for having me on. It was such a joy to talk to you. And I have to say, as I read your book, the moment that struck me most as a teacher was when Asher said that he needed to apologize in school. That just made my heart stop. I'm so sorry that he had that experience. And I'm so glad that he has you as his mom.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That means so much. Yeah, I think about that all the time. And it was a very long time ago now.
We need to make our signs. Kids do well if they can, and just walk around different schools with them.
Petitioning outside, making t-shirts, all the things. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for everything you shared. Congratulations on the book. It's just new this year. Listeners, I encourage you to check it out. I'll have links to everything and all the references because Lily shared a lot of resources and people that she learned from. So I'll have all of that in the show notes page. So thank you again, Lily. It was great to chat with you today.
It was wonderful to be here. Thank you, Debbie.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and the resources we talked about, check out the extensive show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There you'll find key takeaways, links to all the resources mentioned, and even a full transcript of our conversation. Just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this episode. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with the phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting Podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting, and was edited by Andrea Curtis Amasquita. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, you can find us at @tiltparenting on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.
Feel like you're the martyr in your family? You're not alone. Hey, this is Joanne.
And Bree.
And we're from the No Guilt Mom podcast. Bree, we talk to a lot of moms.
Yeah, we sure do.
And if you're a mom who has a to-do list that is so massive that you get overwhelmed and you shut down,
or if you fall into the habit of doing everything for everyone and don't know how to change it, we can help you become a no-guilt mom.
we're going to take you from family martyr to family model. That's role model, so that you role model the behavior that you want to see out of your kids.
You're going to go from being tired and overwhelmed to energized and guilt-free.
Every week, you'll get actionable strategies that you can implement right away from the experts that we interview and from us.
We also have a whole lot of fun, so check out the No Guilt Mom podcast everywhere you listen to your favorite shows.